Hi everyone, this is Tevi recording from room 114. I'm on to the JFK part 2. We're really looking at his role in the Cold War. So this unit won't focus on civil rights because we just did that unit. So just think about all the things that are going on at the same time. And so this unit deals more with the international scene. And so for number 1, it's entitled A More Flexible Response. And so you guys need to know that Kennedy took office during a time of global instability. So pretty much that means, a lot of civil wars going on, a huge increase, next line guys, in nationalism in the developing world, and the Soviet Union actively supported what was known as, quote, wars of national liberation. And so you can put off into the margin, guys, that basically this worried us. Remember, our policy was containment, and we were worried about the spread of communism with these outbreak of wars. So Kennedy felt that Eisenhower relied too heavily on nuclear weapons, which really could only be used as a last resort, and it would destroy the world. So instead, he pushed for a buildup of troops and conventional weapons to allow for a more flexible response if nations needed help resisting communism. And so he also expanded special forces. This was an elite army unit to wage guerrilla warfare. So, covert, secret operations. Here I have pictured the Green Beret, so you can just put down they wore the distinctive Green Beret. And this was his difference, from Eisenhower. I'm on to number 2, aid to other countries. So Kennedy wanted to renew diplomatic focus on Latin America. There, governments were often corrupt. I didn't give you guys room, but over off to the side, you can put down that power was in the hands of the wealthy. Many citizens lived in extreme poverty. These conditions spurred leftist movements, often socialist or communist, to overthrow those corrupt governments. And so poor Latin Americans had resented our intrusions in the past because it was seen as imperialism. This was from a unit long ago, guys, but remember, imperialism is, our kind of paternal attitude toward these countries, of, us being like a father to them and uplifting our brothers there. And so to kind of have a fresh start, Kennedy proposed an Alliance for Progress, which was really a series of cooperative aid projects with Latin American governments. It was designed to create, stability, for the belief was that more stable governments would be able to resist communism. This was a huge commitment, guys. Fill in, the U.S. pledged $20 billion to help Latin American countries establish schools, housing, healthcare, and fair land distribution. In some countries, like Venezuela, Chile, and Colombia, reform was achieved. But in others, local rulers actually would just keep the money, thus increasing corruption and also, continuing abject poverty for their people. This is a good review slide for your guided notes. But the question is, was it a Marshall Plan? And just to remind you guys, the Marshall Plan was our plan after World War II, where we sent money and aid, supplies to Europe to help them resist communism. So something to think about. And here's a picture of Kennedy with some of the Latin American rulers. There's his wife in the background taken. Here's the, in Spanish, the Alliance for Progress. Alright guys, I'm on to one of my favorite legacies, number 3, the Peace Corps. Alright, so the main purpose was that it was aimed at helping less developed nations fight poverty. It sent Americans to provide humanitarian services. Here's a great couple bullets just to show their mission. You don't have to write these down, but it really does highlight that we're having these trained men and women trying to promote understanding of Americans. And, this definitely has some Cold War tactics kind of in the language, that we're trying to also, I guess, promote democracy, in this time of trying to contain communism. Let's keep going. So I think the next line that we're on, guys, is after rigorous training, volunteers spent 2 years in these countries. Here's a picture of President Kennedy with some of the Peace Corps volunteers. I have some great slides, so I'm actually just going to kind of show you guys pictures, and I'll do some talking as well. Here's a great advertisement. What in the world are you doing? Remember his inaugural address, asked people to do things for their country. Here's another, trying to recruit volunteers. Again, just the needs were great, and they still are, to help people less fortunate. Here's, just Peace Corps volunteers planning, construction projects and irrigation. That was a good advertisement from the Postal Service. Countries really all around the world where volunteers are sent. Remember, I was sent to Central Asia. So it really started more in Latin America and really just went worldwide. So I think the last section to fill in, guys, is what volunteers would do is they would fix, sewage treatment. They would train medical technicians. They also would teach English, which was what my main job was. And also they would help build houses and roads. Today it is still active, and it's definitely one of his enduring legacies. So, it's definitely something I encourage you to look into if you're not ready for college after Medfield High School, or if it's something you want to do after college before you want to get to the real world of careers and responsibility. So ask me if you have any questions about what it was like. I'm on to the second page, the Cold War in Space, number 4. So we were losing this space race. So guys, a couple things. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin, Gagarin, he became the first person to orbit the Earth. Even previous to that, the Soviets had launched Sputnik in 1957. So it was clear the U.S. was behind the Soviets. Kennedy worried the Soviet success in space might show the world that communism was winning over democracy. So he soon gave his famous speech to Congress, setting the goal of landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. And here's a picture of him giving that famous speech. And so our successes came soon after that speech. By 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth. And 3 years later, the U.S. sent the space shuttle known as the Apollo, into space, launching it with the most powerful rocket ever built. It was called the Saturn V. It was able to give the lunar module enough velocity to reach the moon, which it did in July of 1969. So the Eagle is what the ship was called, and it carried Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. So fill in their names. When Armstrong, set foot on the moon, we heard his famous words. So you want to fill in, that's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. And so with this, the U.S. had successfully won the space race. The last section 5 is known as the Bay of Pigs. So this worried us, for this is only 90 miles from our country. In 1959, Fidel Castro, pictured there on the right, had overthrown the corrupt Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, pictured there on the left. You guys should know what also worried us is that Castro established ties with the Soviets and started drastic land reform, seizing foreign-owned businesses, many of which were American. The Soviet premier, the leader at the time, was Nikita Khrushchev. I'll spell Khrushchev, guys. It's Khrushchev. Was also showing interest in strengthening Cuba's military. And so the last section there, guys, is, before the end of Eisenhower's term, he had authorized, fill in, the CIA to secretly train Cuban exiles. The exile group, guys, was known as La Brigada, to invade the island, which would set off, we hoped, an uprising against Castro. Okay, and so here's a slide to kind of go over the next section. And so, guys, when Kennedy came into power, he agreed to these plans that Eisenhower had set in motion. And so, fill in on April 17th, 1961, he ordered the invasion to begin. It was a launching of 1,400 armed Cuban exiles that Eisenhower had started the training with. Their location was the Bay of Pigs, which is the south coast of Cuba, where exiles, had land. And so basically it was a complete disaster. Here's a couple things to note: that the boats that we used got stuck on the coral reef. Also, Kennedy canceled air support, right? So the guys had no backup. He did this, guys, to keep our involvement a secret. The uprising we hoped would happen never occurred. And Castro's forces, guys, killed or captured almost all of La Brigada. There are your numbers there on the slide. So, guys, this was a dark moment for the Kennedy administration. It showed the public that their government was plotting to overthrow, a neighboring government. And these disastrous results made us look weak and disorganized. Here's just a few pictures. Here's Kennedy with some of the Cuban exiles. Let me try to find. Oh yeah, here. So here's Kennedy, Robert, guys, doing some negotiations with the Cubans. All right, guys. So your guided notes are over. You don't need to fill this in because we already looked at this during our Cold War unit. But here's a picture of the Berlin Wall. So here's another international crisis during Kennedy's administration. And, we will finish our JFK unit looking at his assassination. Here's an advertisement for him wanted for treason. And here's LBJ, the next president we'll talk about, being sworn in on Air Force One. And there's Jackie, Kennedy's wife. And this is an iconic, right, symbolic picture that most Americans know. The funeral of JFK. And Lee Harvey Oswald is the is the man who assassinated JFK, and over here Jack Ruby kills Oswald as well. So there's a lot of scandal and intrigue and conspiracy theories. So we're also going to be watching a great movie that talks about the Cuban Missile Crisis called 13 Days. It's with Kevin Costner, so you guys will enjoy that. So this is Tevi signing off from JFK. Hope you guys have a great day.